Hey, this meeting is called to order. Good evening. Hopefully everybody's warm. If we see bonfires start to pop up, we'll know why. But it is Monday, January 6, 2014, about 6 o'clock. This meeting of the Recreation and Parks Board Committee. I am Brock Heath, chair of this committee. The other committee members are Mrs. Robin Oda to my right and Mr. Doug Tremley to my left. We are here tonight to consider a recommendation of council regarding authorizing the signing of an agreement associated with the Troy Strawberry Festival to be held within the levee area and downtown during 2014. Mr. Titterington, do you have any more information you can give us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just by way of background, late last year, I guess fourth quarter of last year, members of the Strawberry Festival staff approached the mayor regarding the possibility of relocating the Strawberry Festival downtown. The mayor and I and staff met several times to discuss the pros and cons, as well. I guess one of the cons is the cost, so the cost specifically as one of the items. We've met several times with members of the Strawberry Festival Committee and staff to discuss our concerns, our parameters, what we think would work and wouldn't work, how we could continue to incorporate the levee into the festival event and that weekend, how we could minimize additional costs, how we could cap our costs, since that is every year a concern, making sure that we manage those costs, as well as maintain the health, welfare, and safety of the community, particularly as it relates to emergency responses. What you have is a request to authorize us to sign an agreement with the Strawberry Festival. We expect through the Troy Chamber as their parent organization, but whichever appropriate legal entity is who we would sign with, and that is for 2014 to move to expand the festival to include the downtown, similar to, and I say similar to, although not exactly the same as the Gentlemen of the Road event, with several exceptions. The first being that the Strawberry Festival in 2014 would not include closing the Market Street Bridge. That would remain open particularly for emergency vehicle purposes, but also for traffic. Also open would be Water Street, east and west, to go around the venue. The closing would be Market Street from just south of Water Street to just north of Franklin Street, east on Main Street to Mulberry. Make sure I've got that right. To just west of Mulberry, and then West Main Street would be closed in a similar fashion as how we closed it for Gentlemen of the Road, kind of in a notched closing, so that the access to the courthouse and the county facilities would remain open for the sheriff and for some of their activities, but then would be closed to and through Cherry Street, just west of Cherry. To explain a little bit more, when we talk about expanding the Strawberry Festival to downtown, they would continue to have events up in the levee area. On the top of the levee, the arena parking lot, the stadium, in that area, they have events that are included as an attachment to your packet with the dates and times that they anticipate that they would do those events. We would close the downtown per the map that's in your packet from Thursday at 9 p.m. Through Sunday at midnight, so they'd be open, basically be closed on Friday during the business day and open back up Monday morning before morning business starts. There would not be a parade. There'd just be a little walking parade, if you will, within the venue. The agreement that we would sign would cap our costs at $51,000, which is a general average of over the last 5 years, what we've spent on the gentleman, or on the Strawberry Festival, again, over a 5-year period. That's in overtime. And the Troy Strawberry Festival, as part of the agreement, would pay additional expenses above and beyond that. Several of the discussions that we've had were to better understand what they want to do and what kind of impact that would have on our costs. And as a general number, we believe that above the $51,000, maybe in another additional $20,000, primarily in additional fire costs associated with an expanded venue. And that would all be put into an agreement. As part of the agreement, the activities that the Strawberry Festival would have would be restricted to those that are listed on your packet, so that we don't have any last-minute changes. Now, the only caveat would be if Mother Nature doesn't cooperate that weekend and we have to make some last-minute changes, which have happened in the past, even when the entire event is on the levee. We have been discussing this for the last couple of months. They are in need of, and I apologize for this late kind of notice and discussion, because I know this is a difference from what we've done in the past. It is the first weekend in June, and given that it's a different venue, they ask that we have this meeting, this discussion, and try to get some kind of an idea for them so that they can begin their planning in earnest. They've started some preliminary planning, but they couldn't get too deep into it if there were issues with closing the roads and moving the venue like this, or expanding the venue like this. Troy Main Street, in the discussions that we've had, have been very supportive of this idea, and that's largely because the businesses felt very positive about the gentleman of the road, and of course they look for any opportunity to draw more people towards the downtown and towards their retail establishments. There will not be any alcohol as part of this event, so the venue will be barricaded, but it won't be like that. We're like Gentlemen of the Road, when we had to have the fencing and the barricades as locked down as it was, so to speak. This is a request for 2014 only. That's all we're asking for, and that's all the Strawberry Festival is asking for, so please don't think that just by approving this authorization, that means that every year in the future it's going to be downtown. This is, really dependent on how successful it is, what kind of issues come up, whether this is worthy of continuing, and then we would come back to you with a report with the Strawberry Festival staff to determine whether or not it's worth going beyond just 2014. So you are not giving a blanket okay. We're not requesting an emergency. Again, though, time is of the essence. And there are some members of the Strawberry Festival staff and committee in the audience in case you have any direct questions for them.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Tedrington. Couple questions that I had. Were there any major issues from last time we had it on the square? Was there anything that came up?
No major issues at all. As a matter of fact, I think, and the chiefs are in the back there hiding, that I think they'll agree that, I know they'll agree that there were no major issues and it went more smoothly than I think we expected.
Yeah.
The weather was perfect. There's just some different variables there, but and again, if you recall, for from 2 years ago, only the western part of Main Street was closed, as opposed to the, around the square and expanded closure that this 2014 would be, or would entail.
Is there any kind of issues with closing state routes and different things like that? Do we have to talk to the state?
We do
about?
have to talk to ODOT. We don't think there will be any problem whatsoever.
They're okay
They've been
with
very
it.
cooperative in the past.
Okay. Mr. Zoda, Mr. Tremblay, do you have any questions or comments on this?
The comment I had was that I received nothing but favorable comments after 2012, but at that point, the city had said, we will be going back to the levy the next year, just bear with us for 1 year because of the Adams Street Bridge, and which we so did in 13. But all the only objections were the disruption that I heard were disruptions to county activities. And looking at this, they will be able to function normally.
Right.
The residents, the only comments were positive, and they were concerned prior to, and they were all positive afterwards. Looks like they've done their homework to get the merchants involved, which is what originally was one of the ideas of the Strawberry Festival, is to allow the merchants to participate in the festivities, which they have done. And we still are using the levy for the larger activities that require the green space and so forth. But it does look like they've approached the county somehow and was able to address, their issues. But, yeah, that's the only comments I had on it.
Ms. Zoda?
I'm a little concerned about all the traffic back and forth across the bridge.
Adams Street will be open, where it wasn't in 2 years ago.
But Market Street still carries a lot of traffic, and I would think because of the location of the festival that that would get the heavier foot traffic than Adams. Would there be any barricades along the walkway that would really rein people in?
There could be. There have been some discussions about possibly barricading off one of the lanes of traffic, although at this point, given the list of activities that will be at the levee versus downtown, most of the focus will be downtown, and the heavier traffic will be because the booths will, by and large, the overwhelming concentration of the booths anyway will be downtown, and the levee area north of the river will be more targeted events that specific audiences will go and attend. So we're not as much concerned that we will have major flows of traffic like we did at Gentlemen of the Road. It'll be different in that respect.
Anything else? The comments that I've heard when we did it before were positive. I think people that had disabilities and different things had better access to it when it was down there, and obviously a lot of people liked it down there. But I would like to hear if any other officials have any questions or comments. I see other people in the present here. Mr. Phillips, do you have anything? Or?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Was the county contacted? Do you know if conversations have been conducted with them as to this layout and that sort of thing?
Not yet?
We're waiting.
No.
Um,
However, I will say that this is not varying from the scheme that we use with Gentlemen of the Road, so we didn't vary from that at all, so we really don't anticipate any problems. In our follow-ups to the Gentlemen of the Road, we had nothing but positive from the county, so we wouldn't anticipate anything different. Nothing negative came out, like, well, we wish you would have done this or that. I know that the Strawberry Festival does plan on contacting them about possibly using their satellite parking lots after their regular business hours, similar to the Gentlemen of the Road. So we're trying to be as consistent as possible and ask this Strawberry Festival to be as consistent as possible with the GOTR event.
I see Mrs. Dorston back there, but have any of the nonprofits been contacted or queried about their feelings on this sort of thing? Because a couple of organizations that I've talked to, it's kind of a wobbler.
Should I come up?
Sure.
I can.
Please.
so we can see you.
Hello. After the 2012 festival, we did a survey, a blanket survey, to see kind of how they felt one way or another, and the majority of the responses were very positive. The fact they did a lot better than they thought they were going to. Setup and tear down was a lot easier. And so that was sort of what we've based it on. We have just had, brief discussions, nothing, no serious emails or anything that's gone out about it, because we didn't really want to approach anybody until we had a definite go ahead to know which way we were going with this. So, but just in brief discussions with some of the ones we've talked to, a lot of them said that they did like it better downtown. So, and I think it is based on, who it is we talk to. And one of the things we're trying to do to kind of make it better than it was in 2012, we know that there was a lot of visibility issues with having the nonprofits on the side streets. With having it actually in the square this year, we're hoping that the visibility will be a lot better because they will actually be located on the main streets. There will be nobody on side streets.
I know that's one concern with the nonprofit that I'm involved with. And follow up to that, my understanding of the Strawberry Festival was always the focus of the nonprofits over any, well, that was the focus,
Yes.
over and above any other private business. So I see a lot of positives in the location for disability folks and kids and weather and some other things, but I do have some issues with that. But just those conversations kind of need to be reached out to make sure that people would be okay with that. And did the chamber request alcohol at all?
No.
Did they ever consider that?
No, not at this time, not for this year. Nobody's discussed that at all.
Okay. Those are just the three that I had, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I have another question.
Yes.
Heather, all of the, well, I don't know if any nonprofits were not there in 2012, but all of the vendors that have been on the levy before, will they all be invited back to this?
They will be, yes.
So it
all
could
of
be
the-
everybody that was on the levy could be done.
Yes, and all of the nonprofits will definitely be invited back. Each year, we send out a blanket email to all of our nonprofits asking them if they'd like to come back. And then we also contact our arts and crafters. We tend to take a nonprofit over the arts and crafters just because that's our mission, that's our statement. That's our focus, is the nonprofits.
Do you have any word from the crafters? what
They
their
they
thoughts
actually
are?
were a large outcry of liking it better. A lot of these crafters travel from all over the United States, and so they're used to setting up on streets, and it's a lot easier to set up their tables and their booths on a street rather than possibly muddy, hay-filled levees. So they actually prefer it downtown.
Okay, one more question.
Yes.
Still concerned about traffic across the bridge and people crossing Water Street. Will there be any police monitoring and helping traffic?
There will be security,
crossing?
at all of our barricades, there will be security, and it's a concern for me too. It's something we have been discussing, because we actually originally had talked about shutting down the Market Street Bridge, but we decided that we didn't have enough events over there, and we are having a shuttle drop-off at both locations, so we didn't really feel like the foot traffic would be too big, that it would cause an issue, but there is always that possibility, as Patrick said, to put barricades up.
Okay.
I know that
understand
would make
this
me
is-
feel better too. so,
Yeah. I understand this is kind of a let's try it and see how it goes, so that's all my questions.
Madam President?
One of the things I felt that made Gentlemen of the Road concert very successful was off-site parking for cars. Do you have a plan for off-site parking?
We do. We always have some off-site parking. We normally use Waco, Club 55. We used the fairgrounds the one year that it was downtown, and we always use Meyer. Our main focus is going to be Waco this year, like they did with Gentlemen of the Road. We just thought that worked out really nice, having a location, but we're definitely using at least Waco, probably Meyer as well.
Anything on the north side of town?
We have used Sherwood in the past. There's a possibility we could do that again. I think the only concern is maybe where the buses would cross through. If they would use Market Street or Adams Street, we'd have to see what would work best for them.
And then my other comment or question really is, I see that the bed races are scheduled for the Hobart lot, and I'm not real sure which Hobart lot that is, but I'm wondering about the smoothness of that lot and the different size wheels on your beds. I'm just,
Yeah, it's the Hobart.
See that as being a
It's the
major
Hobart Arena
accident
parking lot.
happened.
We used it in 2012, and it did work. It was just really cold that year, so the turnout was pretty rough, but it was in the Hobart Arena parking lot, closest to the levee, so right on that corner. It took place in that lot. So did the Children's Parade.
And it's fairly well paved or smooth?
I know it worked. I don't remember it being an issue. I know our chairman that year asked if they could repave it or something funny like that, who was in charge of bed races that year. But I think they cleared off the gravel and it wasn't an issue.
That's all I have, thanks.
Thank you, Madam President. Any other members of council? Mrs. Snead, I believe I see Mr. Clark. Yes,
While Mr. Clark was walking up.
she beat you, Mr. Clark.
I just would echo Mr. Phillips' comments that I would remain concerned about the focus on the nonprofit businesses, especially those who are physically located across Market Street, your Strawberry Donuts, your Troy Senior Citizen Center, who have traditionally participated, although I know the band made arrangements for their donuts, but just keeping them involved if you're going to move
Definitely,
away
yeah.
from their site.
I had a meeting with Tamara actually maybe a couple weeks ago and sat down with her, and when she thought originally that we were moving downtown, she thought we were going back to the location in 2012 where it was on West Main Street. And once I explained to her that it would actually be in the square, then she said, oh, well, they can kind of see us from there, so that's not as big a deal. So, and I also talked to her about possibly doing a satellite location so she could be downtown as well. And same with the band boosters. They did that in 2012 and did very well. So, yeah, we continue to focus on our nonprofits as best as we can. And I think also helping out the downtown businesses will also help give back to the nonprofits in the long run because the businesses donate to the nonprofits, and it's that good synergy we can keep going.
Is there a possibility of having the senior center put some signage up? Are you allowable
Yes,
to
yeah,
have-
we've talked to them about that too. Yeah.
Perfect.
Those were all issues that the mayor brought up. He was
did.
concerned about, even including some of the events and activities that remain on the levee in the stadium area, that we still have access to vendors and people so that people don't have to go back and forth. They can have refreshments or food and activities. The Senior Citizens Center comes into play, the donuts come into play. We thought about that, and the festival committee is very sensitive to making sure that we have a balance.
Right.
Because the bottom line is the history has always been the Troy Strawberry Festival has been on the levee. For the majority, it started there, and it has a history there, but we're also responsive to what might work that would help our nonprofits be more profitable and also bring in our downtown, which I personally think is a pretty good look. So it'll be a two-way. Did I say that well, Heather?
Wonderful.
Okay, and Kathy's nodding her head. Okay, Kathy's our chairman for this year in 2014.
Perfect. I know Mr. Clark wants to speak. Thank you, Mrs. Dorson.
Thank you. I would just echo what Mr. Phillips and Mrs. Snee has said. I've always been a downtown supporter of downtown and the Strawberry Festival, and it was started for the nonprofits. That's initially what it was started for. I don't know, Brock, you probably weren't born at that time.
Probably not.
It was started for the nonprofits, and my concern is, like Mr. Phillips was, how many were left off? And I know some of those nonprofits make money during the bed races. So again, all of this seems disjointed to me, the different locations. And for a family, it was initially, again, meant to be a family event. And so for a family to go from, the levee to Hobart to downtown back, it just seems, again, disjointed and not very family friendly. My concerns are also our police department and our fire department does a tremendous job and have always done that. Last time it was downtown, it was perfect weather. I mean, it absolutely positively was. It was 75 degrees. And I can't, as a policeman, when I worked the Strawberry Festival, I knew we had everything, and I can't imagine the issues that the police department, fire department might have. We're at 95 degrees downtown with, people becoming dehydrated and God forbid if there was ever another issue down there, fire issue, or, I also heard many, from the businesses and the county commissioners, I talked to some of the county commissioners, about concerns that they have had, with their employees. And so we had initially on city council been told that this would only be for a year, a one-time deal. And, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I like it being up on the levee. I think it's good. It's all there. It's all family friendly. It's worked for the last forever how long, and I would just think it should continue to work there. Thank you.
Thank you. See Mr. Schweizer back there. Do you have any comments? Here he comes.
First, we have to start with, what's the definition of irony? It's 10 degrees below zero outside, and we're talking about the Strawberry Festival. From 2012, when it was downtown, I was against having it downtown. I thought there were better locations for it because of the Adams Street Bridge being closed. Once Adams Street opened up, or once we had the festival downtown and it worked so well, I was an advocate for it at that point. I say let's move forward with this.
Thank you, Mr. Schweizer. Appreciate it. Are there any other members of city staff that have any comments or would like to say anything? Yes.
I'm going to be in charge of, if you pass this, I'm going to be in charge of preparing the legislation.
Okay.
Per your committee report. What I need you to do in your committee report is indicate if there's any restrictions, such as, my suggestion would be, if you're going to say it's okay, that you say that the city's expenses are limited to the $51,000 they've been talking about in overtime, and that, for example, any insurance costs and so forth would be part of the Strawberry Festival.
Okay.
Perhaps put the times Thursday night at whatever it was, 9 o'clock.
So basically you're just looking for
Whatever it was.
parameters for everything.
Yeah, some parameters, and if you have anything else that you would think of that you need to put in, just general parameters, so he knows what his limits are when he's negotiating.
Okay.
We don't need to, certainly don't need to micromanage, but
Right.
because whatever you put in the committee report,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put in the legislation, so and it'll be at next council meetings.
Okay.
So, give me a chance.
Something to work on.
prepare.
Yeah.
Okay? That's all.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr.
I do
Levison.
have a question about, did I understand they're eliminating the parade? And,
I believe it got turned into a walking parade. Is that?
Similar to what happened in 2012, my understanding.
I don't remember what that parade was involved. It was basically just different
Kind of a Mardi
organizations.
Gras type
To
procession
an opening
through.
ceremony walk.
Opening ceremony walk.
and the other question, and this is not because I'm law director, but a citizen, I guess, and that is, as an ex-band parent, is the band parents, have they been broached that they're not going to be now in the middle of it, they're going to be off to the side, as anybody's?
Not till now.
No, not specifically. However, we anticipated that, like in 2012, did they not have a dual location? They had a nice prominent,
I didn't come.
Yeah. they were on Main Street, they had a table downtown, they did quite well that year.
Okay.
Yes.
That's all I have.
If I can follow up on Mr. Livingston's law director question.
Yes.
What we had anticipated is if you were in agreement with the recommendation that the resolution and the agreement would follow the parameters laid out in the report, and in addition to that, we would attach the maps as well as the correspondence from Heather that has the outline of the events, the times and the places, so that it's all laid out. That way, we very specifically know what's expected, what we can plan around, similar to what we did in GOTR.
Because in this, it looks like we've already got the maximum amount we're going to spend. We've got the locations, we've got the times.
We have the
got the
times,
events.
we have the
Yep,
parameters, yes.
Yep, perfect.
2 more questions.
Yes.
No surprise. I was going to ask about the parade. Have you had any feedback from people on eliminating the parade?
We haven't had too much. It's just become an expense issue for us. Just based on what sponsorships we're getting in compared to the cost, it's becoming over and above what we can do.
That and any businesses downtown that are not retail that would be affected? Any comments or thoughts from them?
In this layout, we're avoiding a lot of the law firms, which I know is one of the problems, one of the groups that had an issue with it in 2012, just based on it being in front of their business when they were trying to operate. We believe in this layout, we're mostly going to be in front of retail, so we won't have as big of an issue with that this year.
Can I just make one more comment?
Yes,
Just
Mrs.
in
Lee.
relation to the parade.
Sure.
In 2012, when we had the walk at the beginning, it went along with the theme, so it seemed to make sense. I mean, I would just encourage you to think about how you're opening it. I understand there's not a parade. I can see that there would be an expense, but maybe something that would go with the
We have a
theme.
wonderful new parade chairman who really thinks outside the box, and I think he's going to be able to do something to really pull it in and make it exciting.
Perfect.
Mr. Crockett, if I could, one more.
Yeah, sure.
One other thing that occurred with GOTR is parameters with protesters or others that would come in during hours, after hours, and having all of the liabilities, responsibilities, and issues laid out on a legal basis for Mr. Livingston, as long as that is understood by all the parties concerned.
Yeah, we'll have more discussion with Mr. Livingston because it may or may not be a little different situation because there is not a closed venue in the same sense as it was with GOTR. There won't be a bracelet cost for as an entrance fee. So there's some different things, and then Mr. Livingston will have to look into those.
Very good. That's all I have, thank you.
When you said protesters, are there commonly protesters at the?
No, we had the chalkers,
Oh, okay.
but we could have, others as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we had a member of the church that stood on the bridge during GOTR, I think, and was handing out Bibles.
Mhm.
It was very peaceful, it was no big deal.
Yeah. Right. Okay, thank you. Are there any other members of the audience that have any comments? So we have the chair. I don't think I see any there. Do you have any other questions or anything before we decide to move forward or not?
I'm certainly willing to give it a try for a year. I like that we're not committing to further than a year, so we can kind of test the waters and see how it goes.
Now, I'm willing to go forward as long as the information we were given with the footprint of what the festival was going to be and the limits and time when the setup is and when tear down has to be done by, and also our financial
Yeah.
limitations. I'd like to go forward with this.
I agree with that. I think it's always good to move forward and try to grow and adapt, and we've talked about how it's been there for a long time, but it's always good to keep our ears open to the needs and the different aspects that come into that. I'm excited about moving and trying this one time and seeing how it works, and then possibly moving forward again after that. So hearing no more comments, we're going to recommend that we move forward with this as long as it's obviously within the parameters that we've received. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are there any further comments for the committee at this time?
Not right now, thank you.
Okay, hearing none, we're going to go ahead and adjourn.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. It is Monday, January 6th, and it is 6:35 PM, and this is a meeting of the Law and Ordinance Committee. On my right is Councilman Lynn Snee, on my left is Councilman Bobby Phillips, and we are here to discuss the adjusting of times for the next council meeting on January 21st. Madam President, do you have?
On January 21st, it is a Tuesday. We moved to Tuesday because of the Martin Luther King holiday. But also in view of that also falls on the same night as the Lincoln Day dinner here in the city. And to allow any members of council and anyone else who want to attend that, we are asking you to consider moving the council meeting up maybe to 5:30 if possible, if that would be an agreement, or 6 o'clock. So it's up for your discussion. But that is the reason for the meeting.
And I would assume that it was a number of us that'll be attending that dinner that night.
And in order for us to move a council meeting, it has to be legislated. So it will, be on the agenda tonight if, one way or the other, if you choose to go forward with
So we'll have to have a motion to change the
the agenda.
agenda once it's,
Right.
if
Yes.
this gets approved.
Right.
Okay. Mr. Phillips, you have any questions?
No, I'm in agreement with Madam President's recommendation.
Do you have a specific time?
5:30 would be fine with me.
I'd agree with 5:30, not knowing our agenda ahead of time. That would give plenty of time.
Okay. And I agree with 5:30.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I would just indicate for the public's knowledge that the governor of the state of Ohio will be here to speak at the Lincoln dinner, so it's not like we're arbitrarily, changing the times just because this fits the governor's schedule. So I would ask that 5:30, if that's possible for
Sure.
everybody.
Sure. Mrs. Oda, do you have any comments or questions? Anybody in the audience have any comments or questions? Move forward with 5:30?
Yes, please.
5:30? Okay, let's move forward with 5:30.
Right, and you'll also be recommending that you amend the agenda this evening to add a piece of legislation, which would be emergency legislation for the 5:30?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Anything further? We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome to the January 6th meeting of Troy City Council. Please silence your electronic devices for the duration of the meeting. We'll begin with the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Mr. Alan Clark. Please stand.
Heavenly Father, we ask you to give us all peace in our minds, body, soul, and spirit. We ask you to heal and remove everything that is causing stress, grief, and sorrow in our lives. Let your peace reign in our family, at our place of work, business, and everything we lay our hands on. Please guide our path through life, protect those who protect us, and especially heal those officers recently injured in mind and body. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Heath?
Here.
Mrs. Oda?
Here.
Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Swayzer?
Here.
Mrs. Sneed?
Here.
Mr. Tremblay?
Here.
Mr. Twist?
Here.
Mr. Kendall?
Madam President, make a motion to excuse Mr. Kendall.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to excuse Mr. Kendall. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall is excused.
To begin this evening, we have several items of organizational business the council needs to handle, beginning with ordinance 01-2014. Mrs. Knight, please read that ordinance.
Ordinance number 01-2014, ordinance employing clerk of council and fixing compensation. This employs the clerk for the years 2014 and 2015. First reading.
Are there any questions from council?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
I'll move to adopt.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
And now Mr. Livingston will administer the oath of office to Mrs. Knight.
I, Sue Knight, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Ohio, that I will faithfully, honestly, and impartially discharge the duties of the office of Clerk of Council, City of Troy, State of Ohio, during my continuance in said office.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Never.
I will now entertain a motion to move into executive session
I would,
to have a confidential discussion with the law director about legal matters.
Madam President, I would make a motion to adjourn into executive session for that purpose. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Schweitzer to move into executive session. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Okay, we'll now move into executive session. We'll be back in a few minutes. And I entertain a motion for council to resume our regular session.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Phillips to resume our regular meeting. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda? Yes. Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Next on our agenda is the approval of rules of council. Is there any questions from council concerning the rules as supplied to us?
I'll make a motion to approve the rules of council.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mrs. Sneed to adopt the rules of council as presented. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed? Yes. The rules are approved.
Council now needs to nominate an elected president of council pro tem who would serve as president of council in the event of the absence of the president.
Madam President, I would like to nominate Alan Clark as Council President pro tem.
Second.
Is there any further nominations? Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Snee and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to nominate Mr. Clark as president of council pro tem. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
The clerk is elected.
I will now accept nominations for clerk of council pro tem.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion for Mr. Phillips to be clerk of council pro tem. Second.
Are there any further nominations? It's been moved by Mr. Clark to elect Mr. Phillips as clerk of council pro tem and seconded by Mr. Tremblay. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips is elected.
Thank you. Mrs. Knight, please read the minutes of the December 16th meeting of Troy City Council.
Minutes of council, December 16, 2013. There was a presentation to retiring Treasurer Edward Cox. Committee reports, Law and Ordinance Committee recommends legislation that legislation of ordinance number 026, 2013 be approved. Ordinance number 026, 2013, a rezoning, was given third reading and was adopted. Following various comments, council adjourned at 7:20.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Madam President, I move to accept the minutes as read.
Second.
It's It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to accept the minutes. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead? Yes. Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Pitts?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Move on to committee reports, and our first committee report of the year is from the Buildings, Streets, and Sidewalks Committee, the 2013 committee, as their meeting was held in late December. Chairman, Mr. Bobby Phillips, has that report for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On December 16th, committee members Oda and myself met to consider recommending the ordinance of assessment for the sidewalk portion of the North Market Street Improvement Project. The final costs are less than estimated, which will be a savings to the property owners. Following approval of the ordinance of assessment, property owners are advised of the amount to be paid. Those costs not paid directly will be certified to the county to be collected as part of the property taxes over a 5-year period. It is the recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the ordinance of assessment related to the sidewalk portion of North Market Street Improvement Project be prepared. And this is submitted by Mr. Kendall, Mrs. Oda, and myself as chairman.
Are there any questions from council on the report? Do you have anything further, Mr. Phillips? Thank you. Next, we have committee reports from the Law and Ordinance Committee, and Chairman, Mr. John Schweizer.
Yes, Madam President, we've got about 4 reports. The first regards the replat and vacation of easements, Kings Chapel Drive North. Committee members Schweizer and Snee met on December 16th to consider the replat and vacation of easements for the Car Star lot on Kings Chapel Drive North. The storm sewer location and ingress easements on a vacant parcel did not fit the construction design. The vacation of the easements and replat reflects the actual construction and has been approved by city staff and recommended by the Troy Planning Commission. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared approving the vacation of easements and replat for the Car Star location on Kings Chapel Drive North. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Kendall, Ms. Snee, and myself as chair.
Are there any questions from council on this report? You may continue, Mr. Schweizer.
The second is in regards to opposing the passage of amended substitute HB 5 related to municipal income tax. Committee members Phillips and Snee met on January 2nd to review the severe negation impact that amended substitute HB 5 would have on the collection of municipal income tax. As currently proposed and approved by the Ohio House of Representatives, the annual negative impact of that bill to the city of Troy income tax revenue is $750,000 to $1.25 million. Because of the many negative results of this drastic proposal, many communities are voicing opposition to the passage of this bill by the Ohio Senate. Recommendation: recognizing the negative factors of amended substitute HB 5, we believe that Troy should join other communities in publicly opposing this. We ask that legislation be prepared stating opposition to the amended substitute HB 5 for approval by the Ohio Senate, so that the opposition is stated prior to the Ohio Senate considering the bill. We support emergency legislation. And this is submitted by Mr. Phillips, Ms. Snee, and myself as chair.
Are there any questions from council? Please continue.
Okay. This committee met prior to council meeting to provide a recommendation regarding the January 21st, 2014 meeting of council be scheduled earlier than 7 p.m. to accommodate those attending the Lincoln Dinner event. The January 21st meeting will be held on a Tuesday due to the Martin Luther King holiday rather than on the stated or standard Monday. To provide an opportunity for elected officials to conduct council business and attend the dinner event, we recommend that legislation be prepared for the starting time of the January 21st, 2014 council meeting to be 5:30 p.m. This recommendation is supported by Ms. Snee, Mr. Phillips, and myself as chair of the Law and Ordinance Committee. And at this point, I'd like to make a motion that we amend tonight's agenda, move that the agenda of tonight's council meeting be amended to add ordinance 04-2014, changing the starting time of the January 21st meeting of council. And again, this is approved by Mrs. Snee, Mr. Phillips, and myself as chair.
I'll second that.
Is that you? It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mrs. Snee to add to the agenda ordinance 04-2014. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
The motion is passed. The agenda is amended to add ordinance number 04.
Thank you.
One more.
Please continue.
Okay. The last is regarding a liquor license application notification. The Ohio Division of Liquor Control has transmitted the notice of stock transfer of the existing D5 and D6 permits for Applebee's from Thomas and King and Company, DBA Applebee's, 1759 West Main Street, to RMH Franchise Corporation, DBA Applebee's Neighborhood, at the same address. Objections must be filed by January 21st. The police department has advised the city has no basis of objection to the license based on the applicant. And I believe that's it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brockheath is up next with a report from the Recreation and Parks Committee.
Thank you, Madam President, appreciate it. On January 2nd, this committee met to consider authorizing bidding for the concession operations at the Paul G. Duke Park. The concession contracts for the Little League football field and the softball fields expired at the end of the year. The Recreation Board has recommended that council authorize bidding new contracts. These contracts will be based on a 2-year period. It is our recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Recreation Board of the City of Troy to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for the operation of the concessions at the Paul G. Duke softball fields and the Paul G. Duke Little League football field. This is respectfully submitted by Mrs. Oda, Mr. Tremblay, and then myself as the chair.
Thank you. Does anyone on council have any questions on the report? Okay, our last report this evening is from the Safety and Health Committee and Chair Robin Oda.
On January 2nd, this committee met to discuss a resolution supporting efforts in the Miami Valley to encourage regional sustainability and supporting the Dayton Region Green Initiative. While we are certainly supportive of the concept of the Green Initiative, there was discussion that some of the language could be interpreted to be more of a commitment than intended. We asked that there be some rewording of the draft legislation. Upon receiving that draft, we will meet again for review and to provide a recommendation. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Clark, Mr. Heath, and myself as chair.
Okay. Do you have a meeting time set for that yet, or no?
No, we do not.
Okay. Thank you. We now open the meeting to citizen comments. There is a 2-minute time limit at this point in the meeting, and Mr. Livingston is our timekeeper. Does anyone in the audience have any comments or questions related to the agenda items this evening? If so, please come to the microphone and state your name and address. Seeing none, then we'll move on to resolutions and ask Mrs. Knight to read Resolution R1, 2014.
Resolution number R1, 2014. Resolution strongly opposing the passage of amended substitute House Bill 5 by the Ohio General Assembly, encouraging the adoption of changes recommended by the Ohio Municipal League and declaring an emergency. This was reported on this evening. This would be the first reading.
Is there any discussion from council on this resolution?
Move for suspension.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Move for adoption.
I strongly second that.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Phillips to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R2, 2014.
Resolution number R2, 2014, resolution authorizing the sale during calendar year 2014 of municipally owned personal property which is not needed for public use or which is obsolete or unfit for the use for which it was acquired by internet auction pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 721.15D. This is an annual piece of legislation that council must adopt to allow for the use of the internet auction sites. However, any item that has a value of over $1,000 would have to come back to council to be individually authorized to be sold. This is the first reading.
Are there any questions from council on the resolution?
Move for suspension. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Schweizer to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schweizer?
Yes.
Move for adoption.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schweizer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R3, 2014.
Resolution number R3, 2014, resolution authorizing the Recreation Board of the City of Troy, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into contract for the operation of concessions at the Paul G. Duke Park softball fields and the Paul G. Duke Little League football field. The current concession operation contracts have expired. The new bids will be done on a 2-year basis. This is the first reading. This was reported on this evening.
Are there any questions from council on this resolution?
Move to suspend. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Tremblay and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schweizer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Phillips to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schweizer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
The resolution is adopted.
Move on to ordinances and ask Mrs. Knight to read ordinance 02, 2014.
Ordinance number 02, 2014, ordinance levying assessments for sidewalks for the North Market Street Improvement Project. The assessments would be notified to each property owner. They would be given until February 21, in which to make payment to the city. Thereafter, for the unpaid assessments would be certified to the county auditor to be placed on the tax duplicate to be placed on the taxes over a 5-year period. This is the first reading of the ordinance, and it is noted that the sidewalk project portion came in under the estimate.
Are there any questions from council on this ordinance?
Move for suspension. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schweizer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes. Move for adoption.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Twist to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schweizer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read ordinance 03, 2014.
Ordinance number 03, 2014, ordinance approving the replat of in-lot 10163 in the city of Troy, Ohio, and relocating easements. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission and was reported on this evening. This is the first reading.
Any questions from council on this ordinance?
Move for suspension. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schweizer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweitzer and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read ordinance 04, 2014.
Ordinance number 04, 2014, ordinance changing the time for the meeting of Troy City Council on January 24, 2014, and declaring an emergency. The time of the meeting on January 21 will be at 5:30 p.m. This was reported on earlier by an oral report, and this is the first reading.
Are there any questions from council on this ordinance?
Move for suspension.
Second. It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes. Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweitzer and seconded by Mr. Heath to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Oda?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda, I'm sorry. Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
That completes the business portion of tonight's meeting. Mrs. Knight, are there any communications or announcements?
No, they're not.
Mayor Beamish, do you have any comments this evening?
Well, just a few. First of all, wonderful bicentennial kickoff that we had. A compliment to our co-chairs, Councilman Doug Tremblay and Stan Kegley and their committee. We certainly have a rich 200 history to share, and some of that was given an opportunity to showcase this past Saturday. It's going to be a great year for us as we celebrate our birthday. Second, you have at your place, you can probably read over later for your reading pleasure, but the mayor's been quite busy in 2013. It's 8 pages for you with highlight film, so I share that with you for your perusal. I do want to mention I have the responsibility to make appointments, and I have 2 that I'm making. One is to the Recreation Board, and it will fill out the unexpired term through 12/31 of 14, and that is to fill out the unexpired term of Mr. Brock Heath, who was on the Recreation Board, and that individual who is assuming that responsibility will be Doug Jackson. Many of us know Doug, and I think he'll do a good job. Normally, that's a 5-year term. So he'll finish out Brock's 1-year term, and then he'll be asked to be reappointed. The other individual is filling a 6-year term this year, is Stephanie Johnson on the Planning Commission. Will be replacing Bill Lohr on that commission, and so Stephanie Johnson will assume that role for a 6-year term. Just wanted to point that out to you. I think both of those candidates are outstanding community individuals, have great respect and reputation in this community, and I think they'll do a wonderful job for all of our citizens of Troy. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chitterton, any comments this evening?
Thank you, Madam President. A couple of things to point out from the items of interest. Number one, believe it or not, technically we have finished the 3rd round of the leaf collection, finally. So any of the leaf piles that are out there, we do have the tea bags, and we will pick up the tea bags as they are put out at the curb. We are recycling Christmas trees, live ones, please. And so if you put those out at the curb, we will get those as we do regular trash and recycling pickup. Martin Luther King Day is on January 20th. We, as far as trash and recycling pickup goes, will be on our regular schedule. We are not making any adjustment for that. We never do. I do want to update the items of interest report on the salt and snow overtime. Actually, just costs, overtime and regular time. Since that report, we have had 3 more incidents. It's been a busy weekend. We have spent, instead of the $37,200 that was reported between labor and gas and salt costs, $49,659, and have used 552 and a half tons of salt. That is through this morning at 12:30 in the morning. So we still have to calculate today's mess, and we'll probably wait until middle of the week to provide a new one, just because we'd really like to see this weather go up into the positive digits. Speaking of which, and one of the quote-unquote casualties of this latest event is that our staff, as you know, our trash pickup, residential trash pickup is done by our crews. We went out, we did trash pickup as normal, as usual today. We will continue to be on a regular schedule through the rest of the week. There was some thought that maybe we delay it a day tomorrow because it's supposed to be quite frigid. Staff said no, we'd prefer to just get push on through instead of coming in on Saturday. That would not have cost us anything because we would have been able to adjust schedules, but nonetheless they wanted to continue through. We did find out late today that Rumpke, our contractor, called off their crew today, did not pick up the recycling today. They will be back tomorrow. They will be on their holiday schedule, so everything will be pushed back a day. So that which was not picked up on Monday's route will be picked up on Tuesday. The Titterington family will be putting our trash out tomorrow and expecting the city crew to pick up the trash, and then we will be putting out our 3 recycling bins for Wednesday pickup. Again, Rumpke will be in on Saturday to pick up the Friday recyclables. Apologize for that. We had no control over that. It does create some confusion, I'm sure, and we will deal with issues as they no doubt will arise. We have sent out a notification. You may have all gotten, or some of you, hopefully all of you, got a code red phone call. We also have posted it to our website, Facebook, Twitter, and sent out a press release to all of our media outlets. That's all I have. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Livingston, any comments this evening?
The only thing I would point out is that I've added to your light reading agenda by filing my annual statutorily required report. And other than that, I have nothing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stickle, any comments this evening?
I have no comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I just want to note that I appreciate all the reports from the city departments that are in our council packets each time, and would just request that any annual reports from various departments that will be filed in the coming weeks also be included in those packets. Any comments from council members this evening?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Tremblay?
Kind words from the mayor about the bicentennial birthday kickoff. Greatly appreciated, but really the 2 people that did the majority of the organizing are Tom Cooney and Jody Davis. And they're the ones that did the majority. And the main thing is they selected the they selected the venue, and they also selected the date, which was the only good 2 days we've had in the last 2 weeks. So I don't know how they knew that, but they should buy a lottery ticket. But I also want to thank ITW Hobart Food Equipment Group. They were the sponsor of the venue, and they were the host. And we appreciate all their contribution, and also the exhibitors and the volunteers. It was just a great event. And everyone wants to know when we're going to do it again, and I said, in another 50 years. We have to." And we've already picked out a girl to do it. She was 12 years old. She'll be
That's right.
She'll be 66, 62 at the time. So she'll be just perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schweitzer, anything?
Yes, Madam President. Just want to remind everybody, on January 20th, there will be a Martin Luther King celebration. This year it'll be held at Richards Chapel. The service will start around 10 a.m. It's going to start with a march, and it's going to start behind La Fiesta in the parking lot. We're going to go to Sherman Street, down Elm Street, over to McKeag Avenue, and then up to Richards Chapel. Immediately following the service, it will be catered by Lee's Famous Recipe. So come on out and help celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Thank you. Mr. Phillips?
Yes, Madam President, two questions. Well, actually, a statement and a question. According to Rumpke and their contract with us, did they call and notify us that they were going to be?
They did not. We must have missed that call, but we've talked to them about that.
Okay, thank you. I would also encourage all of our residents in the city to call, I would assume Mrs. Knight, to give them their phone numbers if they have cell phones, to be added to the One Call Now list if they do not have landlines. A reminder to do that, otherwise they will miss really important notifications. So that's all I have.
Mr. Twist, anything? Mr. Heath?
Excited for the year here, excited to be on board. Thanks for helping me learn and grow as we go along. I'm excited to work with you all.
We welcome both of you. Glad to have you on board. Thank you. Mr. Clerk?
Madam President, thank you. Just a brief comment. I would ask all of our community to keep all of our public safety officers in their prayers for the coming year, and hope that they all heal physically and mentally rapidly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Zoda, anything this evening? Mrs. Snee?
Yes, Madam President, I would just like to again say congratulations to the Troy High School Band. They, or several members of the band, marched in the London New Year's Day Parade, and they were featured prominently in the video of that parade and also in a British newspaper, the Daily Mirror. There was a picture of the band members. They had a fabulous trip and represented Troy very, very well, including mentioning the Strawberry Festival in a pre-parade interview with Molly Veneman. So congratulations to Kathy McIntosh, Molly Veneman, and Brian Wisman, and the band members.
Thank you. Any comments from city staff this evening? Anyone else in the audience have any comments? Thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. Have a safe and peace-filled week. Meeting adjourned.